Hello Ride On people. Today we're going to talk about tyres. Now most people know the difference between a track day tyre say versus an off-road tyre. And most of us know enough to look at our owner's manual when it comes time to replacement to see what the manufacturer recommends. But when it comes to those funny little numbers on the side of the tyres, it all gets a bit confusing, doesn't it? So just what do those funny little numbers mean, and how do we know we've got the right tyre for our bike just by looking at those numbers? Well, let's take a typical example. A 120/70 ZR17 M/C 58W. The 120 refers to the tyre's overall width in millimetres. 70 is the height or aspect ratio, to use its technical term. This is simply the height expressed as a percentage of the width. So 70% of 120 would equate to 84 millimeters tall. Z is the speed rating. Z means it's rated as reliable for speeds up to 150 miles per hour. R is the construction type. So in this instance, R stands for radial. 17 is the diameter of your wheel. Sports and street bikes generally have 17-inch front and rear. Adventure bikes typically have a 19-inch front, and off-road bikes 21-inch front. MC, you guessed it, that simply means that it's designed for motorcycles. 58 tells us it's rated to carry up to 236 kilos or 520 pounds. W means it's rated for a maximum speed of 168 miles per hour. Often people will say things like, it's got a 120/17 front, and what they mean is it's typically a large capacity road bike with a 17-inch front wheel and a 120mm diameter front tyre. In other words, the wheel size and tyre diameter are what people typically say when painting a mental picture of the size and type of tyre that they have.
So what else do you need to know? Well, it's good to check your tyre pressures, obviously. Your owner's manual will probably say, before every ride or something like that, but every few weeks or so, it's well worthwhile checking your temperatures in your tyres, your pressures rather. Obviously the temperature affects that in terms of your PSI, whether it's in summer when it'll be a bit higher or winter when it's a little bit colder, and just check them, keep an eye on them every few weeks. TPMS is becoming more commonplace on cars and bikes now, obviously, and typically the computers are so good now and the sensors are so good that they're more accurate than the typical gauges that most people use at home, and certainly much more accurate than gauges at gas station forecourts. If your bike doesn't have TPMS, the tyre pressure monitoring system, definitely buy a good gauge. It's well worth investing in a good gauge and a good tyre inflator. It will pay you back in the long run. What I typically do is I overinflate my tyres by 2 psi. You'll lose a psi or so just unscrewing the equipment, even if you do it carefully and quickly. So 2 psi over is usually about right. Then I usually wait till the TPMS monitor tells me that it's 2 psi under, and then I know it's time to top them up again. I never let them get more than 2 psi out of spec. And the reason why I don't let them get too far out of spec is it can definitely affect the wear rate of your tyres, the grip rate, and also the internal temperature. My BMW M2 competition amazingly can tell me the temperature inside the tyres, and I noticed that 2 tyres on the same axle with just sort of 1 or 2 psi different in the tyres can really affect the tyre temperature inside. So that's something that's interesting and well worth noting, and it was such a difference in mine that it really made me realise I never really want my tyres more than a couple of psi out at any one point in time. So always check your tyre pressures when cold. Make sure you haven't taken the vehicle anywhere for at least 30 minutes or so, and preferably overnight, and the pressure should be the first pressure reading that you see on your gauge, be that in the equipment that you're using, or on the TPMS. So TPMS typically won't show the PSI obviously until you got the road kind of half a mile or so, but put it on straight away so you can check it as soon as you make your next journey. Another thing to consider with new tyres is scrubbing them in. In years gone by, they used to use release agents in the moulds to actually release the rubber, release the tyre from the mould itself, and that would typically take a couple hundred miles just to kind of bed in that resin that was left on the surface of the tyre. Thankfully, that's no longer the case. Really, they don't use that type of resin anymore in tyres, and they do pop out the mould pretty easily, but they still come out kind of smoother than a cashmere codpiece. So at the end of the day, you still need to take it easy for 50 miles or so. It's just kind of the sensible thing to do until they start feeling nice and grippy again. That said, you should feel confident leaning over on new tyres even in the wet. They don't take that long to bed in. As soon as the tyre is up to temperature, that is, feel free to put a reasonable lean angle on. I'm not suggesting you get your knee down in the wet on brand new tyres or anything like that, but all I'm saying is once they're warm, put your trust in them, and better to kind of have to lean it too far into a corner because you've misjudged it than stand it up based on the premise that you won't have enough grip, because then you definitely will not have enough grip to grip around the corner, and you'll end up on the wrong side of the road or crashing your bike. So put your trust in new tyres. They're miles better than they were back in the day. Having said that, don't come running to me if you crash on brand new tyres because you've been thrashing your bike to death and riding it like there's no tomorrow, and if you do, obviously there might not be. Hopefully I wasn't giving mixed messages there. If tyres are so good from brand new now, why do we even need to bother running them in at all? Well, it's not so much the compound that needs running in, which is what everybody assumes, right? It's actually because the tyre is so stiff from new now. A modern tyre is full of silica, nylon, rayon, aramid fibres, steel belting, oil, carbon, elastometers, whatever the heck they are, and usually the tyres nowadays are multi-compound as well. They often have a hard centre, hard wearing rubber in the centre of the tyre and a softer one on the outside, or possibly even two, depending on what type of tyre it is, whether it's a dual compound or a tri-compound. So all that gabbins has to kind of ease itself into action, and even the tyre itself, the way it sits on the rim, has to kind of settle down and seat in, bed in a little. So it all requires a little bit of TLC just to kind of settle down before your hoops begin to feel like your favourite pair of old blue jeans again. But if in any doubt what's the best tyre for your bike, consult your owner's manual. Number one, your manufacturer spent a lot of money, along with the tyre manufacturers, testing the tyres that are approved for your bike, and they are the ones listed in your owner's manual. You can also take additional advice from your dealer, who is likely to be very knowledgeable about alternate brands and compounds that may well suit your type of bike and the type of riding in which you want to do. But ultimately, whatever you get, take it easy the first 50 miles, particularly if they happen to be wet miles. But as I said, after that, really put your trust in them. The ability of most modern tyres way outweighs the rider's ability. So, be confident and put your trust in them. Final food for thought: if you stand your bike up mid-corner because you're scared you might run out of grip, the chances are it won't end well for you. If you hold your nerve and lean that a little bit further, the chances are it'll be just fine. Choice is yours.
Well, I hope you enjoyed this video. I really appreciate all your feedback and support for the Ride On channel. I hope you're already a Ride On subscriber, but if not, please subscribe straight away. And last but not least, ride often, ride carefully, ride on.